Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. So what we're gonna do today is actually go through a full track creation process. We'll build it on the Dawless setup and then we're gonna move it into the DAW, we're gonna mix it, and then we're actually gonna release the track. The track's actually out today, so if you wanna check it out, I'll put a link in the description. So let's get into it. Go to this MIDI channel. I've got it set already to MIDI channel 9, which is the bank we're on the SP. So we can control everything. If we go into chromatic mode, perfect. And we're in 97 BPM. I'm gonna go, because I don't like the metronome. I always like to just have kind of like a kick as a click track. So we'll program that in so we've got just a 4 on the floor. So let's get back into this one. We'll go here. We'll just do 1 bar to start. Okay, let's shut that 4 on the floor now. Okay, there we go. And let's add a little swing. First we'll quantize this just a little bit. I'm just gonna do a little. So if we hit this, we can sample into the Digitakt. We'll set this to 64 steps. We could do free and then use like slice mode or something, but I think we'll set it there. And then we're gonna just record into it. Let's hear what we've got going on. Yeah, that's lush. That's lush. Okay, let's save that. So now we've got it on 8, and if we go into the amp, there's a little bit of a pop. So now we can either keep it as this one-shot mode, or we could do something cool and see what happens if we go into slice. Warp could be cool too. Let's try warp first. And let's see what happens if we... Sometimes you can get some really cool stuff. I'm just gonna see what we get. So if we wanted to go for more of like a synthwave sound, we could do that, but all that popping, that's actually kind of cool. I kind of want to do that. I think we're going to stick with that for now. Let's do that. And then we're going to need to go to, we'll just do 64 steps. And we need to program this in on the 1 and the 3. And then I think we fixed that amp. Let's do a little sample sound or sound design. There we go. This is the other reason I wanted to start sampling it to the Digitakt. You can do so much with like the LFOs, which we're about to do. If we go on the filter, now we can get that filter kind of opening and closing by the LFO. Yeah, I like that. And then we can even, on that LFO 2, maybe go, see if we can find like pitch or something. A little warping on, yeah, here we go. Just a little pitch change. So this is just gonna, it's like an LFO on the pitch. We've already got a lot of pitch warble from the Lo-Fi Junkie, but I like that. And then if we wanted to, we could even drop it a couple octaves. I really like the sound of that. It's almost like synthwave lo-fi or something. But I like it. And we could totally do effects if we go on bus 2 on the SP. All right, we've already got something pretty cool, and it's only been a couple minutes, so let's get a couple more effects on here. Okay, so there's a, because we dropped the pitch of that sample, there's a lot of low ends. If you hit the filter a second time, you can get out some of that low end. And I'm gonna do a little sample rate reduction, little bit reduction too. just messing with the filter. Okay, and let's go into that reverb. That should be good. Take out some more of that low end on the reverb too. Delay, I like a dotted eighth. And let's add some additional percussion on these. Let's get that cowbell in to start. Always gotta throw in some cowbell. So I think we'll do 7, and we're on a random page. I'm gonna put these really quiet. They're just kind of in here to start. Because we're gonna get this nice and quiet and do some velocity automation too. I just want ghost note cowbell basically. So let's just start by lowering the volume in general. And I'm gonna up the pitch a bit. Okay, now I'm gonna put a filter. And we're gonna drop out that low end, get a little reverb on there, and some delay. So this is just gonna kind of dance around in the background, and then I think we'll pan this to the right a little bit, and then let's get a hi-hat. There we go, and we'll quantize that. Okay, and I'm gonna actually change the hi-hat source. I think I've got some other hi-hats in here. Yeah, we can do a Lindrum hi-hat, that sounds good. Bitrate reduction. There we go. I'm gonna drop the volume. And then we're gonna pan this one to the left. There we go. All right, it's working. Now we could even buff up those drums by adding additional ones, like additional kicks and snares. Actually, one thing I think we might do really quick, we've got space. Let's add a really reverbed clap, but with a lot of attack. And the reason I'm doing that is it's gonna go underneath the snare, or should. So we'll program that just straight on the 5s and just put them a little off, a little early, no, a little off. I want these a little off time. We'll see, that could go horribly wrong. But it should just add a little additional hear what it sounds like without it. Alright, that should be good. Now, let's see what else we can do. What other sounds can we get? We dropped the pitch, so we're gonna need to so we might have went to E major. Oh, I like that. I'm just thinking how I want to put that part in. I think we'll just record it. I don't have the mini log connected via MIDI, so we can't just program that via MIDI. That would be the easy way, which would be nice, but I was having issues with the mini log MIDI routing, so I think we're going to have to sample that into the Digitakt, and then if we want to, we could free up space by putting it over here. Okay, that should work. Let's stop that. I want a little attack, just enough to cover it, and then we're gonna put the filter down. It didn't catch the tail of that reverb. I probably should have set it to max so that it would, but I'm just gonna put some reverb on the aux end and some delay. That should make the loop sound a little more natural, which is what we're gonna want. So that's why adding a little bit of reverb at the end will just add a little more tail to the sound so that it doesn't just constantly sound like a loop. But so what I'm gonna do is, if we shut off everything but this, right? Just this one sound. What I'm gonna do is go to record, and then I'm gonna set a measure because we're synced via MIDI with the BPM. So I'm gonna set it to 4 because that's what we're in, 64 steps, 4 bars. And I've got it set to wait so that until I hit play, it's not gonna start recording. In this way, you could also set some effects, but I don't want any effects here. We could do an isolator just to tone down the sound a little bit. But all we're gonna just do is when we're ready, just hit play and it's gonna catch it. See? Let's turn the effects back on. Okay, so if we wanted to now, what I would do is go to, let's say, get these all back on. This is the new bank, so we're gonna need a new MIDI channel. So we're gonna go to this, gonna turn on MIDI, go to channel, and we're in F, so we're gonna need to go to, I think that's gonna be 6. And then hopefully that's not gonna trigger any MIDI on here. Find that, there it is, right there. So all you're gonna need to do there then is just sequence it. We're gonna get some weird feedback here, but just to show you, when it restarts, I'm gonna turn it on. And you could just program it in. So now that one's being triggered, so we can shut 2 off or just take that off the map. But I'm gonna leave it because you never know. And then I'm just gonna check here that this one is on the grid. If you want to learn how to do all this type of stuff, it's all in my SP404 cheat sheet. The link is in the description. It's a quick way to reference like anything going on with the SP, and it's got a whole thing on MIDI sync and doing all that type of stuff. Honestly, I kind of think that's the track. So now that we have the main elements of our track, it's time to bring everything into the DAW with Overbridge. And Overbridge lets us take each track from the Digitakt and bring it into separate channels in the DAW. This gives us the flexibility to edit, arrange, and add new layers to flesh out the track. I'm going to just sample one full loop of the track, but it's going to go into 8 different audio tracks for an easier and cleaner arrangement as we go on. All right, so now we've got our stems, and if you don't have Overbridge, there's a couple other ways you can do this. You can either jam out a full stereo 2 track, just record that stereo 2 track into your DAW, and make sure you sync the BPM of the sampler or whatever hardware with the BPM in the DAW. And you don't have to actually sync with MIDI, you just need to make sure they're set to the same thing. And this way, as the track records, it will be set so that if you want to change parts or add automation and stuff like that, you can do that on time. You can copy a part, paste it, and it will all still be in the right timings. Another option too is after you do that, you can stem split that and split it into a couple different layers so that you have a little more flexibility, but that can bring in artifacts. And then finally, the last thing you could do is, since we just did a single loop of every sample, you could just do track mutes and mute everything but one track on your sampler or your hardware, record that in, and then mute that one and unmute another one, do the same through all of the sounds you've got, and then you'll be in a similar situation as us with this sort of setup. So here's the track. Let me just play it so you can hear it. So it's just all the parts, and the first thing that I'm going to want to do is get Dr. Vibe on here, because in the original version we were playing with the SP, so I was able to add the typical SP special sauce that I do, which is cassette sim and compressor. We can't do that, but Sketch Audio has an incredible plugin called Dr. Vibe, and I have a full tutorial that I'll post if you want to check out how to use it. It is for iOS, but it's also for Mac OS, and so I'm going to use this 303 master I have. It brings in a lot of noise, but as we play it won't matter, and so that's fine. You can actually turn down the noise too as well, so it's no big deal, but this is going to make a big difference, and I'll show you what it's doing. This is without it, and this is with it, and we're going to add this to separate tracks as well as we go along as part of the mixing process. But I like to just kind of emulate that little special sauce in the 404 by using this, and really we're just using the ADC to DAC to add a little grit, and then the mix slammer, which is just adding that compressor. So I'm going to mute it so we're not hit with the white noise right now. But now let's talk about arrangement. So we have our layers. Let's get a basic arrangement of the track. The way that I do that is I basically just copy all of this a ton of times, and then I figure out the map of how I want the track to go. I'm gonna loop out the track like I've done, and then I just find the parts that I want to start with. So if I want to start with this main pad, I'm gonna start there and delete everything else, and then we're gonna bring in, let's say, the drums. So we'll get rid of everything else here, and so on and so forth, and then we'll make pairbacks where we take out everything, maybe a B section, stuff like that. And once I've got it done, I'll kind of explain it as we go. Okay, so here's the arrangement, and you can hear I've got Dr. Vibe back on, and I also added some effects, which we'll talk about when we come to the mixing stage. So basically, the way I've done it is I start with the main pad, and then we're gonna go in and add some drums. But what I've done here is I've actually chopped the drums up a little bit to give a little more variety to the drum track. I'd love to hear from you in the chat. If you use the Digitakt, do you feel like it has kind of like a cold digital sound to it? I don't know how to describe it, but everything I put through it always kind of just gets this kind of like cold sheen to it, and like you can hear it in these drums. So what I did was I added some tape mellow-fi to add a little distortion, but no noise, no mechanics or anything. And then I added that Dr. Vibe, which really is using that mix slammer to just compress it to a crazy amount. And I've dropped the sample rate to 12. Again, without it, we'll play it here. Now listen to it. It's just like compressing into itself. And then I added a noise gate to get out some of that hum when I mute it. And then just an EQ, which I've just taken out a little bit of that high end. And so that gives us a really nice drum sound. But what I did from there is I would copy that drum, and then I was just doing very selective chops to just create a little more momentum to the track, right? Because otherwise it's just the same loop playing through and through. So if we just mute it, it's gonna stop. And then we're bringing more parts of it in. And then there's a big dropout before the next part of the instruments are brought in. And that brings us to bringing in additional instruments. So when it comes to setting up the track, I'm thinking about keeping it interesting the whole way through. And that's done with ear candy, MIDI, and transition effects. And so the first thing that we're doing here, though, is just the ear candy, which we're changing the drums throughout, so it's not sounding like the same loop. And then when we bring in the bass and one of those leads, we actually drop the drums out. So it's just like we're introducing something new, but we're taking something away, so it makes it really unique. And when the drums come back in, it's just a whole new sound. So let's check that out real quick. Here we go. So it really focuses on the new element before the drums come back in to just really add some novelty to it. And I've actually brought in the cowbell and the open hi-hats as well in that part. And then we just keep building and we do additional dropouts. Now there's two ways to approach a dropout. There's the start of a beat or a bar, which is this part, but there's also the end of a track, which is a great way to transition into a totally new part. Like that. We've teased in this new melody that's fading up, and then we bring in everything into the new part, and that works really well to just create a specific vibe to it and just keep things interesting. And I've actually muted the bass here because we're going to talk about MIDI. I was not the biggest fan of how that bass turned out. It's okay, but as you can see, I really chopped it up, and that's one of the beautiful parts of having each track as its own audio file. I was able to take the bass and be like, yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of the bass, so I can completely change it. So I've removed some notes, because normally it would go boom, boom, boom. It would do like a third note in this part right here, 10.2 or whatever. And so I just muted that, and then I bring it back there. So it's just keeping things a little more to my style as I go. But what I don't really like is that bass for the chorus. I want the chorus to hit a lot harder. And so what we can do with that is take a single note of that sound, maybe that note, because that should be the root note. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to open up a new sampler track. We'll go to software instrument, go to, I think we can get away with using quick sampler. So we'll go quick sampler, put it right here, and we'll just drag that track or that audio file. I'm using a laptop, so it's not the biggest screen. We're going to drag that right into optimized tuning and loudness, search for loop points, all that. And that's going to give us, if we just go to one shot, a very cool little bass note that we can then create MIDI for. See, we can just go across the notes. And so since that's the root note, we'll probably want it on C. Okay, so I actually changed it to a sampler because that gives us a little more flexibility with how we want to do it. And then because I can use a filter and drop the filter. And so I took that single bass line, right? That single one here, and we made this more kind of like driving bass. And I'm going to put it in that chorus so we can hear it. And we'll probably want to sidechain that, do some other stuff. And what I would probably do is move this here. Since we do that dropout, introduce the part here. And then so that kind of brings it in right like this. So we'll play that part again so you can hear it. And we're gonna want transition effects, which we'll talk about as we get to ear candy and things like that. The other thing, that bass needs a little more weight, and so what I'm gonna do is actually create an FM bass underneath it. We'll go and just use the Logic one. This is again the power of now having the DAW is, it's a little weak, right? And we made this whole new bass line, this whole new bass part, and it's kind of lacking in oomph or something like that. So let's go to, actually not EFM1, but we'll go to the retro synth, and there's a pretty decent bass patch. If we go to synth bass, it is plucky FM bass. We'll use that, and we'll just move this MIDI that we made down here, and we can just tweak the attack a little bit. Okay, so we're just gonna tone that bass down. I just want a little coloration to the main bass so it stands out in the higher frequencies a little bit more. Perfect, that's all we need. If we're using Logic, we can also add some session players to get some more drum changes and just more kind of humanizing drum sounds and stuff. So we're gonna go, let's do Songwriter, and I just wanna add maybe some like tambourines or something in that chorus part. So we'll just click off that, add the hi-hats. Now this is gonna sound kind of weird, but it's actually gonna fit. And once we make some changes and stuff, maybe we get that out and that out. And let's just do these. That's perfect. Now, one thing I want to do is to get that to sit a little more in the mix and also sound a little more warped. I definitely want to put on something like Dr. Vibe. We're just adding ear candy, right? Things that will make the track more interesting is all I'm looking for. We're going to drop that bit depth to real quiet and drop that sample rate as well. And then, okay, now hear it. As the song goes, we're constantly adding new sounds that just keep things more interesting because we're starting with just that simple synth, and we're going to embellish that a little bit too. There's so many options. There's the MIDI route, there's the session players and additional samples and loops route, but there's also the idea of taking the audio and doing something kind of crazy with it. So like this main synth sounds good on its own, but I think I'd like to duplicate it twice, and we're going to put it here, and we're going to raise the octave of these because that's going to give us a more fleshed out sound. By default, right there, it already sounds a little more interesting, but we're going to pan these two left and right, and we don't have to do the full left and right. I'm just going to for this, but we're going to throw on, I already have some tape delay from the original sample, but we're going to put just on one of them, we're going to put a delay that allows us to go off sync, and we're only going to do about 6 ms, 6 to 9. And what this is doing is, if you just pan two duplicates across the stereo field, you're going to get some really nasty phase cancellation, or may. But by adding this little bit of delay to one of them, it's taking it just off enough that they're not going to sound exactly the same, and so it won't be as much of a stereo cancellation. And we can check it with this correlation on the multimeter, and it's not affecting it at all, so we're good. I mean, it's affecting it a little bit, but it's not doing it in any way that's too bad. And then we could add additional effects to these. We can obviously tone down their volume, which we're definitely gonna do. I'm thinking maybe something like Crystallizer or something might be cool. It's just to create a little more variety in the sound. And something we could do is maybe for this first one, we fade them in so it starts off as the original idea. What this should do is lead us nicely into the drums coming in, and we may want to even add reverb and get rid of these two right here and bring them back in later. But so we start with just the synth. You hear those highs rising, stereo field's getting bigger. Yeah, and so we'll just drop their volume a little bit. And then we could do something like that where we drop those out now when we introduce that new part and bring them back in later. There's one other element to ear candy that we're gonna put as a separate thing, and that's transition effects. We want to create noises or effects or delays that are going to give the ear a heads up that, hey, a transition's coming, because transitions can sound a little sloppy. As you notice, like when this bass comes in, right, it's kind of empty. But once we add some effects and some automation and some risers and things like that, we can make it a lot smoother. We're just smoothing out those transitions and giving the ear something to hold on to. So I'm gonna do a bunch of them and then I'll show you all the ones that I've made. All right, so I took some time, added a bunch of risers, but I also did some additional ear candy. Here, we're gonna get back to those transition sounds I was talking about. I just took ocean waves, and I didn't even need to do automation. I just added some delay and some reverb. But what that's doing in those transition is it's giving something new to kind of listen to, like I mentioned earlier. So let's listen to that part where I was saying the bass is a little dull to come in. Now there's new sounds to clue in on and hear, and it's not as rough of a transition where everything's dropped out, but oh, a new bass. There's also these other sounds. I added a reverse sound from the drum loop as well, and then I added a cymbal crash right here. And I've also got this random loop from the drum layer that I reversed. And I added an Apple loop that just kind of gives a little riser as well. So you can take whatever sounds you've got. I mean, you could even just record your own voice doing something, or take noise from the SP404 sound generator and add these in with some either volume automation, rising up or rising down, or some delays. Another idea you can do for transition is add some sort of delay or reverb and automate it to go up, so that as a track is building, it's getting like more of a reverb, lush sound. It almost becomes a white noise riser. So what we're gonna do is go into the automation for this. Supermassive from Valhalla is a free plugin. We're gonna go to that Supermassive. I use this one patch that's stock in the newest update called Synth Cloud. It's a really lush reverb, but if you do it like this, where you automate it up, it's gonna create something really great for a transition. We're not gonna do the full amount because I still have this lead playing. You could also duplicate it, have one rise and have the other one restart at the normal volume when it comes in, but we're not gonna do that for this example. But just to play it in isolation, and let me go all the way up so you can hear it. It's gonna become just this long drone. And so if we do that with everything, you'll hear it's a nice riser, but we'll play the other risers with it so you can get a taste of it all together. Hear how it echoes out, and then it leads us, that tail of the reverb leads us nicely when the drums come back in and all that. But I would definitely experiment with Supermassive and things like that. So that's my workflow for taking a pretty simple Dawless idea and turning it into a full track with the power of a DAW. So as you can see, I did a lot of changes. I added a ton of effects, automation, all that kind of stuff. And that's always there in the DAW. But for me personally, and let me know in the comments if you feel the same way, when I'm just starting a track, having all of those options becomes too much for me. It's like an option paralysis. There's just so many things I could choose that I just decide not to choose. So I like to start more simple with the Dawless setup. Everything's kind of set. Like I have my effects in the SP, I have whatever I can do with the Digitakt and the synths, and I just throw it in there and make something. Once I've got that done, I've got the genesis of the idea, so I'm not gonna get stuck in the option paralysis. Then I feel more comfortable throwing it into the DAW and just going crazy, making all these different ideas, creating samples of samples, creating new ideas by chopping up those samples and then adding tons of ear candy and using those session players or additional loops, whatever, if you're not using Logic, to add that little ear candy that just makes the song interesting and flow. I'd love to hear if this hybrid approach inspires you, or if you use a similar one or are thinking about using hybrid workflows. Let me know in the comments. And if you want a full tutorial and a couple of other workflows when using Electron Overbridge, check out this video next.